It's Cosmo here, and doing the first ever test run of the old Cosmo gaming channel on YouTube. Today we're talking about Primordial Soup. And as you can tell from the box shape here, this is one of these older games from the 90s, older German games specifically. After the 90s, you didn't see that many companies publishing with this box shape, at least not for too much longer. And this is a famous one. This is Primordial Soup from 1998. Yes, if you look it up on Board Game Geek, it will say 1997, but I like to look at the games based on when they won their awards, or when they were considered for awards. And this one was second place in the 1998 DSP Award, the Dutcher Spiel Prize. Not to be confused with the Spiel des Jahres, which I have the 1998 winner here. A real big logo, because they were very proud of it. It was a real big driver of sales. But the other important game award was the DSP. And that one, you guys probably haven't heard of it. I do have visual evidence that it mattered at the time, because you got it even on the logo there. They're proud of it. The big difference is the Spiel des Jahres is an award started in 1979 and is probably the most famous game award in the world. But it's really meant for family games, and meant for family games initially in Germany, in the German market, but then now that German games have become this international sensation, the Spiel Award is sort of an international award too. But the difference is, the Spiel was voted on by a smaller committee of around, I think, 10 people, and they did have sort of criteria in mind that are more specific than the DSP. These kind of game journalists and people who were part of the Spiel des Jahres committee, they're trying to pick a game that will be accessible, have a good rule book, be fun, be family appropriate, both in terms of theme and mechanisms, and be unique, because you would go into the store not know necessarily about games. You like games, you're a gamer, you want to play games, but it's not your life, like someone like me or you might be. It might be. So they're just going to buy something that has this familiar logo. They remember in years past buying games that won the award, or have been nominated for the award, or recommended by the committee, and they've had good luck with that. So that's what the award is meant for. And you don't want to replicate things. You don't want worker placement game number 5 in your collection. They're trying to keep things fresh. So Elfenland won in '98, but in terms of the DSP, they don't necessarily care about originality, even though this game is very, very original, but they care less about accessibility. It's just pretty much which game was the best. Which game did you think it was the best? Because unlike the Spiel des Jahres, this award was much more wide open. It's anybody who lived in a German-speaking country, so I think Switzerland, Germany, which other ones would there be? Bulgaria? No, not Bulgaria. I'm missing a major one. Austria, probably. Yeah. Anyways, so what's the deal with it? DSP, second place, '98. Is that a weak year for games? No. The winner that year was Tigris and Euphrates. Elfenland finished third, and it's a good game. It's from Alan R. Moon. And then fourth place was Through the Desert, which is one of maybe the best light, interactive, placement route building games ever. So what's the deal with Primordial Soup? Well, first of all, it is a thematically unique game. It's one that is about evolution. There are a fair number of games about evolution in one way or another. In fact, there is a game called Evolution, might be the most famous in the genre. There's also one called Evo, which I have over on my shelf over here. You can't see it, and that one's about dinosaurs. This is older than those ones, and it is even more unique than those, because it is about the primordial soup, as in the name, at least the English version. And the primordial soup is a term maybe you remember from school at some point in science class. It's early before we can even really track what was going on. It's early Earth, where it's like covered in mostly surface. The surface of the Earth is covered in water, and there's all sorts of matter of various types in the water, and from that soup, you have species evolving and life evolving and emerging, okay? So we are playing as amoebas, or I guess a species of amoeba, and we're going to be customizing our amoeba with special powers. And that's where the real fun of the game is, that's where the strategy of the game is, figuring out how to evolve and create cool combos, and also very much interactive where you have to react to what other people are doing. So it's unique in that sense, but it's also unique. It has the trademark of the game is it was poop. Okay, and you might say, what are you talking about, Cosmo? Well, the game board is going to be covered in various colors of cube, as is common in, El Grande, which I have here as well, an old German game, area majority game. Here, the cubes are not representing your presence; they're representing food stuff, and the food stuff is what your amoebas need to eat in order to survive. And to have a balanced diet, your amoebas, maybe you're playing red, you're the red player, you want to eat a balanced diet including green, yellow, and blue cubes. And if you're successful, as you move around the board, you'll eat those cubes, and then you'll excrete cubes of your own color. And that's where you can see that's the poop. Because you're going to be eating, excreting, yeah, that's poop. You're never going to eat the poop of your own color, but inevitably, you're going to be eating other people's poop, too, as the game progresses. Is it food stuff? Is it poop? Well, it's kind of a gray area, right? So that's where some of the jokes of the game come in. And it also has humorous artwork by Doris Mateus, who is one of the designers of the game as well, along with her husband, Frank Nestle. And it was self-published by them, by Doris and Frank Games. They have this cute logo of a hedgehog, which is featured in their games, in the gameplay as well of a few of their games. This is probably one of their most famous games. I think it's probably their highest ranked on Board Game Geek. And Doris is famous also for her artwork, not only as being somebody who is involved in the game world who's a woman, but for an artist. She did the artwork for this game, but the other two that I brought here with me for reference, for not just for the Spiel Award, but the fact that it's another Doris artwork game. And not only does she do fantasy and whimsical science stuff, she can do the austere, boring-looking stuff too. Wow, the beige El Grande. So she's a heavyweight of the industry as far as her contributions to the German gaming world. And so Primordial Soup, we played it the other day at one of my game meetups where we play a fair number of older games, and we had 3 different copies, 2 different tables, and it outperformed my expectations actually, because this game has a reputation for being overly long and fiddly, because you have all these cubes, you're constantly pulling them off the board, putting them on the board. It's a bit procedural, there's a bunch of steps each round you have to resolve, and the number of decisions you make over the course of the game doesn't match, an El Grande or a Tigris and Euphrates probably. But it was more strategic than I thought. It wasn't just, I'm going to buy a power here, I'm going to buy a power there, let's just see how it runs. It wasn't like, a deck building game where you're just kind of watching it go. Or maybe not a deck building game, but like an auto battler. For those of you who know about games like Challengers or video games of that genre. It wasn't like that. It's much more involved than that, because there's interesting turn order aspects, and you can you could get into a spot and eat the food that somebody else later in the turn order would have eaten. You can, the same process happens when you're buying cards, the evolutionary cards, which there are a limited supply of them. And the turn order is very dynamic, because certain phases will happen in ascending order or descending order, and all of it is based on where you are on the score track. So it helps balance the game as well in terms of the leader and the player trying to make the comeback. So very interesting mechanisms in that sense. It's very thematic for a German game, which tend to disregard theme a little bit. And it was a bit long, but you need the length, I think. It mentions in the rulebook playing a shorter game, but the full length is where you get this arc of evolving and periods of scarcity and abundance in terms of the board and the food that's available. Because also when your amoebas are unable to eat, they starve, and they take these beads that you put on these little wooden poles. And I should probably take the components out when I do real videos, but this is just a test run. But or maybe I'll cut to footage at some point, which makes it more complicated, but that's what you really need to do to step up the quality of the videos. But yeah, your amoebas will start starving if they can't eat, and if they take too much damage, 2 damage, they will die, and their corpse is now on the board. The corpse is cubes. It'll be 2 cubes of each color, and so there's this life and death connection that'll happen, and so it's really interesting how that affects each other. And then the powers, the way they combine together in unexpected ways, sometimes really cool. I can see how each game will be different from the last as players try to prevent each other from getting that same combo that was so prosperous in the previous game. Yeah, very fun. Nothing quite like it. Few games like Evolution or Oceans, which I have over there, or although I haven't actually played yet, I'll have to see how that compares. But uh, so really highly recommend it. Actually, surprisingly, one of my favorite board game podcasts is So Very Wrong About Games, and one of the hosts who is very knowledgeable about older games, Mark Bigney. I follow him as a geek buddy, and I used to really look at his ratings and comments of older games to see what was worth getting, and it's been really good for me. It's been led me to a lot of great stuff. But he didn't like this one, and he had a joke. He had a joke about it. He said, "I don't give two shits for this game," and then he mentioned the length of it and some arbitrary aspects, maybe the balancing of the costs of some of the powers, but he was giving it short change. I think it's quite good. But yeah, I could see why there are criticisms to be had, but it makes up for it. It actually reminded me a little bit of El Grande in terms of how interesting the interactions and turnover between player were, and the way that players had to target the leader at times, try and go eat my amoebas if you have the predator power, and which was really amusing because I was actually the initial predator. I gained the ability, I planned all around getting it, and I was very mobile, and I was able to kind of act like a wolf, and my opponents were like sheep, and I ate like 3 or 4 of them all in one round. Because you can only use the ability actually when your amoebas would otherwise starve, if they're unable to find food, and so I had to deliberately move them into positions where they could do that. And sometimes the game movement's not easy because your initial amoebas are not evolved enough to move properly. They have to either drift with whatever the environment card whichever direction the environment card tells them to, or you're just spending some of your precious BP and rolling die to see which direction you'll go, hoping that you get better odds of getting something more viable than whatever the drift is. But I evolved where I had free movement, didn't have to pay BP to do it. I could choose deliberately which direction I wanted because I'd evolved to level 2 movement, which you have to get to level 1 and then level 2. Level 1 you would roll 2 die, level 2 is just choose which direction. And then I also had speed, which let me move 2 spaces. So really, I was a super predator at that point. But my opponent, who was last place, got the second predator card and ended up eating me when I didn't expect it, and before I could even do my turns. So pretty interesting, and that's just the iceberg. This is just the tip of the iceberg about the game. I could do a full rule teach, but I'm just doing this test video and expressing my enthusiasm for the game. If you get a chance to try it, you should. Don't play it with AP prone players. Become a master of the rules before you teach it, and of the special power cards, so you can really give people the best chance to understand it, because the game is better if everyone understands it and plays it maybe even more than once. But it's long and not the type of game you play every week, I would say, but maybe multiple times per year, heck yeah. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. Hope I enjoyed looking at myself and my receding hairline and my chubby cheeks and lack of muscularity. But there's time for everything, and my awkwardness. How much do I act like myself while on camera versus in reality, and how do I look on camera, and how do I sound? It's weird hearing your own voice, But let's give it a pause. And what I'm most curious about also is how does it look in the background? How do I come across on video with my hand gestures and with lack of eye contact, things like that? Does it work or not? So here we go. Let's give it a pause.